Most people imagine healing as a before and after. Before, broken. After, fixed. A straight line from the bottom to the top with a clear moment where it all changed, a dramatic breakthrough, and then a new life where the old wounds don't reach you anymore. That's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. Healing from a painful childhood is not a montage. It's not a single conversation with a therapist that unlocks everything. It's not a book that changes your life or a morning where you wake up and the weight is gone. Those things might be part of it. But the actual shape of healing is messier, slower, and more confusing than any of those images suggest. In this video, we're going to trace the real shape, not the Instagram version, not the therapy speak version, the lived version, the one with the awkward middle that nobody shows, the part where it gets worse before it gets better, where you lose things you didn't expect to lose, and where you spend a long disorienting stretch wondering if you're even making progress at all. This is what healing from a painful childhood actually looks like. And the fact that nobody talks about the middle is exactly why so many people quit before they get through it. Let's start where 13 videos on this channel have already been. The before. The before is the state most people don't realize they're in. It's the hypervigilance that feels like personality, the people-pleasing that feels like kindness, the self-reliance that feels like strength, the numbness that feels like peace. It's all the patterns we've traced in this series. The performance contracts, the abandonment math, the volume knobs turned down, the fortresses with welcome mats. The before isn't suffering, exactly. It's management. You've built a system that keeps the pain functional. It works, it's just expensive. And you've been paying the cost for so long that you've stopped noticing the invoice. Healing doesn't start when the pain begins. It starts when you notice the cost. The beginning of healing is almost never dramatic. It's a crack, a small one. Maybe it's a sentence in a video that makes you pause. Maybe it's a moment in a relationship where you catch yourself performing and think, why am I doing this? Maybe it's a therapist asking a question you can't answer, and the silence after the question feels different from the usual silence. Heavier, more honest. The crack is the moment the system you built to survive your childhood gets seen for what it is, a system, not who you are, not reality, a system, one that was built under specific conditions that may no longer apply. Most people expect the crack to feel like relief. It doesn't. It feels like vertigo, because the system you're seeing clearly for the first time is also the system that's been holding you upright. And questioning it feels like questioning the floor you're standing on. That's normal. That's the beginning. And it's supposed to be uncomfortable. This is the part nobody shows you. The part between the crack and the other side. The part that makes people quit, go back to the old system and tell themselves healing doesn't work. The messy middle is where the real work happens. And it doesn't look like progress. It looks like falling apart in slow motion while trying to build something new with the same hands. Here's what actually happens in the middle. First, the grief gets louder before it gets quieter. When you start to see the patterns clearly, the conditional love, the self-soothing, the performance contracts, the grief underneath them surfaces, not gently, loudly. Because you're not just grieving what happened, you're grieving what didn't happen. The parent who should have comforted you, the childhood that should have been safe, the version of yourself that would have existed if the conditions had been different. This is the grief that has been stored underneath every workaround you built. And now that you're looking at the workarounds, the grief has nowhere to hide. It rises, and it's bigger than you expected. Not because it grew, because it was always this big. You just couldn't see it behind the walls. And when it surfaces, it doesn't arrive as understanding. It arrives as tears that come at random, as anger at parents you thought you'd forgiven, as a deep tiredness that sleep can't fix. This is the grief doing what it was always supposed to do: be felt. It wasn't supposed to be stored. It was supposed to move through you, and now, finally, it's moving. Second, some relationships don't survive the middle. When you stop people-pleasing, some people leave. When you set boundaries for the first time, some people get angry. When you stop performing the version of yourself that kept certain dynamics comfortable, those dynamics collapse. And it's not always bad relationships that end. Sometimes good ones shift into something unfamiliar, and the unfamiliarity feels like loss even when it's actually growth. This is the part that feels like evidence that healing is making things worse. It's not. It's revealing which connections were built on the wound and which ones can survive without it. But that revelation doesn't feel like wisdom in the moment. It feels like loneliness. And there's a specific ache to this stage. You're doing something healthy that produces an unhappy result. That contradiction is one of the hardest things about the middle. The right thing doesn't always feel right. Not yet. Third, you feel worse. Sometimes significantly. The volume knob starts to turn back up. And the first things that come through aren't joy and lightness. They're the feelings you suppressed, anger you didn't know you had, sadness you never fully processed, fear that was always there but buried under competence. The defenses come down, and the feelings they were holding back come forward. All of them. Not in order, not gently. This is the phase where people say, I was fine before I started therapy. I was managing. Why did I open this? And the answer is, because managing wasn't living. But the space between managing and living is flooded with everything you managed to avoid. And that flood is real, and it's heavy, and it's temporary, but it doesn't feel temporary when you're in it. Fourth, you don't know who you are for a while. The performed self starts to lose its grip. The people pleaser, the overachiever, the one who's always fine. These were identities, not just habits. And when they start to soften, what's left isn't a shiny new self. It's a gap. A strange, disorienting in-between where the old version doesn't fit anymore, but the new version hasn't formed yet. You try things that don't feel like you. You say things you're not sure you mean. You make choices that surprise you. And the whole time there's a voice that says, this isn't working. Go back to who you were. That voice is the old system lobbying for reinstatement. It's not wisdom. It's familiarity disguised as safety. The identity gap can last months. It's the phase where you look in the mirror and don't quite recognize the person looking back. Not because they're different, but because you're seeing them without the costume for the first time. And the person underneath the costume is quieter, softer, and less certain than the one you showed the world. That uncertainty isn't weakness, it's honesty. And honesty takes longer to build an identity around than performance ever did. Fifth, the plateau. The part that feels like nothing is happening. You've done the grief, you've felt the anger, you've lost the relationships that needed losing, you've sat in the identity gap. And now, nothing. No breakthroughs. No dramatic shifts. Just days that feel slightly different from the ones before, in ways so small you can't be sure they're real. This is where most people decide healing has stalled. It hasn't. The plateau is integration. It's the phase where everything you've processed starts to settle into new neural pathways, new relational patterns, new default settings. It doesn't feel like progress because progress at this stage is measured in texture, not events. The way a conversation feels slightly easier, the way a boundary gets set without a panic attack, the way you notice a feeling and let it exist without performing it or suppressing it. The plateau is the most important phase, and it's invisible. And then, slowly, you arrive somewhere different, not fixed, not healed in the way the word implies, like a wound that closes and leaves no trace, more like rearranged. The wound is still there. The history is still yours. But your relationship to it has changed. You notice the old patterns, but they don't run you the way they used to. The performance contract activates, and instead of following it automatically, you see it. You feel the pull to overgive, and you pause. You hear the volume knob turning down, and you choose to let the feeling through instead. The other side doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like quiet, like a room that used to be loud with emergency signals and's now just a room. You're in it. You're present. And the noise has settled to a level where you can hear your own actual thoughts instead of the old scripts. People around you might not notice the change. It's not external. It's in the way you hold a conversation, the way you sit with silence, the way you let someone care for you without flinching, the way you say no without building a legal defense first. Small things, quiet things, the kinds of things that don't make good montages but make the difference between surviving your life and actually living in it. You start to notice pleasure again, not the performed kind, but the quiet, genuine kind. A meal that actually tastes like something. A laugh that arrives without checking with the room first. A moment of stillness that feels like rest instead of danger. These returns are subtle, but they're real. And they're yours in a way that the performed versions never were. One more thing, and this might be the most important part. Healing doesn't erase the wound, doesn't give you back the childhood you didn't have. It doesn't make the grief disappear. Some nights, something catches you. A song, a smell, a parent tying a child's shoe, and the ache comes back. Not as loudly, not as desperately, but it comes. And that's okay. The ache isn't a failure of healing. It's proof that what happened mattered, that the child you were deserved more, that the absence was real. The ache is honest. And honest is what healing feels like when the performance is finally over. You won't be unbreakable. You'll be more honest about where you break. And that honesty, that willingness to be in your own life without armor, without a script, without the contract, is the thing you were always building toward, even when you didn't know it. The healing was never about becoming someone new. It was about finally meeting the person who was there before the conditions were set, before the contract was signed, before the armor was built. They were always there. They were just waiting for the performance to end so they could step forward and say, "I'm the one you've been looking for. I've been here the whole time." At Inner Lens, this is what we've been building toward from the beginning. Every pattern we've named, every wound we've traced, every contract and volume knob and fortress. It was all leading here, to the honest, unglamorous, beautiful shape of what it looks like to come back to yourself. If this video found you in the messy middle, you're not lost. You're in the part that nobody shows. And the fact that it's hard is not evidence that it's failing. It's evidence that it's working. Stay here with us. There's more to see.